So welcome to our Rethink webinar. I'm Andie Simon, and this is Andie Kramer. You need a lot
Hello
of
there.
Andies today. And we have some wonderful people who have signed up to come. And I'm so anxious for them to chat with us, talk to us, ask questions, and begin to understand why this wonderful opportunity we have in Zoom land is great. This is my virtual book tour. And so I set up Rethink with Andie Simon webinars so that I could go on a virtual book tour. Andie Kramer is a wonderful chapter in my book. And my room is solid, it's all with books. But Andie's had 4 books written, and so we're going to talk a little bit about her book. It's Not You, It's the Workplace. You can see all of my markers in here because it's just a brilliant book, but she's a wonderful woman to share with you the kinds of things that are so important about how women are changing the world today. And it is a transformative time. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Andie Kramer. And I'll give you her bio. And then today we're going to talk about her journey, because we're all about rethinking that journey. And most importantly, what she's doing now to really address gender bias in the workplace. And her work is coming out of her experiences in life, which sort of ties the two together. And so I'm hoping those of you who are attending, we have a nice turnout today. Some of you are just wonderful, and I know who you are. So it's a terrific time for us to really make sure that you're all in here. And I'm watching and you are all in here. That's great. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to move us right along here. And Andie Kramer is a nationally recognized advocate for women's advancement and an authority on gender communications. Now, you must remember that conversational intelligence is the essence of what we live. It's the stories we tell, the feedback we give, and it's all in the conversation. And she's smiling, as you know. She and her wonderful husband, Al Harris, and they've written stuff together and they do work together, deliver keynotes and communication workshops on breaking through bias in the workplace to over 10,000 people annually. They are the authors of this book, It's Not You, It's a Workplace, Women's Conflict at Work and the Bias That Built It. And she's also the author of Breaking Through Bias Communication Techniques for Women to Succeed at Work. You'll hear us talk about communication a lot because we are really looking to change the conversation, because women can't get gender parity, position, and even power without guys changing how they think about them and how they talk to each other. She's co-founder of the Women's Leadership and Mentoring Alliance. That's an organization that creates meaningful connections between women working in professional services through events, education, and mentoring. Well, virtual today, but it will be coming back. She's also an attorney, and that's the core part of her story in our book, a partner in the international law firm of McDermott, Will and Emery. And she's an expert on so many things: derivatives, financial products, taxation. She has made significant contributions to tax policy and is considered an influential voice in tax experts. And it's really marvelous to listen to her balance her expertise in the law field with what she's doing for people. Some acknowledgements. She was named one of the 50 most influential women lawyers in America by the National Law Journal for her demonstrated power to change the legal landscape, shape public affairs, launch industries, and do big things. That's what we're going to talk about today. She has others, and she was a 2014 Gender Diversity Private Practice Lawyer of the Year by Chambers USA. And it is such an honor and a privilege to have you there. It was so wonderful to have you as a chapter in our book. And now that our book is out, and we're on virtual book tours. So Andie, thanks for joining me today.
Well, Andie, if we get confused, all we have to do is say Andie and we'll know one of us will respond. Thanks for having me. Very glad to be here and was honored to be part of your new book.
Well, as we are talking about all of this, though, help the listener understand if they haven't read the book yet. Who's Andie Kramer? Give us a short bio, because I think starting with nobody wants a lady lawyer is a great starting point. And remember, it's all in our stories. So Andie's going to tell you her story, but as you listen to it, you can hear her own hurdling, and she's a big hurdler. So how did we start as you don't want to be a lady lawyer?
Well, when I I'm not sure, 11, 12, maybe 13, but I think 11 or 12, I saw a trial. And I saw the defense putting on their case as to why this young man was not a murderer, and was very touched by and overwhelmed with the whole process, and thought, I'm going to save the world. And so I decided at that moment that I wanted to be a lawyer. What I did was I told my parents, and they knew one lawyer, and asked him if he would take me to lunch and talk to me about what it would be like to be a lawyer. And I spent an hour with this man who spent the entire time telling me that I did not want to be a lady lawyer, that nobody liked lady lawyers, that I would never have any friends, I would never be married, I would never have any children, I would always be alone, and it would be a terrible, terrible life. And obviously, since Andy gave you the sneak peek that I am a lawyer, I paid no attention to him and proceeded forward. But what I found is that he actually was touching on an important part of the issues that women face today in the workplace, which is that if we're talented and competent, then we're perceived as unlikable. And if we're likable, then what happens is we're obviously not competent. So what we find ourselves in, what my husband and I in our books refer to as the Goldilocks dilemma, which is that if we're too nice and kind and sweet, that's great, but no one wants to work with us. But if we're aggressive, assertive, you do this and you do that, and we're meeting at 5 o'clock to go over it, everybody's hair catches fire, the women's and the men's. So I learned fairly early that that following my dream was not something that was supported by everybody. And as I said, that didn't slow me down. I was committed to being a lawyer, and I have been for my entire professional career. What I found, though, is that when I first started practicing law, I started at a tiny little law firm, and they couldn't have cared if you were purple polka dotted. If you did a good job, everybody wanted you on their projects. And then when I went to a big firm, people didn't quite understand what was I doing with my own clients, with my own corner office. It didn't fit their expectations of what a woman lawyer was supposed to be about. And what I found was that people of good intentions, good, well-meaning people carry around with them stereotypes and biases about women and men and leaders and families and responsibilities for getting the job done. And all of that falls into expectations and biases about gender. And so what I found when I served on our compensation committee at my firm was that the women would write self-evaluations about, I was on the ABC team and I worked with so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. But the men who were on the team, and she could have very well been the one who had come up with the idea that saved the client $500 million. He's the one who says, I single-handedly saved the client $500 million. I climbed to the top of the Empire State Building. I circled around looking for damsels in distress, found the wall that had the most damsels in need, and I saved the day, and I'm a total rock star. And it turns out that what that's about is it's about the same thing that the lawyer who took me to lunch when I was 11 or 12 was playing in on. Women were told, were trained, were socialized that we're supposed to be nice and kind and sweet and modest. Men are encouraged to, oh, he's just, boys will be boys. And so this dichotomy makes it so that when we're communicating with other people, they can be confused about our talent or our skill set because they have a vision in their mind about what a perfect anthropologist or physician or Indian chief is going to be like. And so that prompted me on my journey of trying to make certain that women understood the secret handshake that is involved in getting the job done.
Well, let's talk about this because you're all about change, as I am. And the book I wrote, like yours, was designed to help people see what's possible, to see, feel, and think in new ways, see it through a fresh lens. And what we know is the brain hates to change. The brain has a story in it, and that story is real, and we hold that to be true. You know, the only truth is there's no truth. But we certainly know that to be true. Once we have that story, as those guys and the gals do, they see the world through that lens. The brain goes to the familiar and to the pleasure, not to the pain or the unfamiliar. And now we want to change the workplace and the relationship between guys and gals. The challenge is to what? Because we can say we want to get rid of the bias, but what do we replace it with? How do we train them to become more familiar with it? It's like a play. I often use performance metaphors. They are playing Macbeth really well. They know how to play it. And now I want them to play Hamlet. They haven't got a script, no rehearsal time. I want women to say things differently and guys to say things differently. What shall they say? And now that's something we're beginning to work on as well as you are doing. But I thought that this is a good time to think through if we're going to change bias in the workplace, how? Let's talk about your program because I think it's extremely valuable to both women and men. You know, if we think the women is a problem, I will tell you that the research online communication, Zoom land, women are still, if they talk too much, they're pushy, and if they don't talk enough, they're not competent. We can't win, even in Zoom land. So how do we change this? Your thoughts?
Well, one of the things that I'd like to underline as to what you said is that stereotypes and the biases that flow from them are fairly hardwired. They're hardwired habits. And so a lot of the diversity and inclusion training that we see is don't be biased. That's not going to solve the problem.
I don't want to be, but I'm doing. That's right.
They say, I'm not biased. Exactly. I don't know what you're talking about. And if you strapped a lie detector test on some of these most biased people, they would pass with flying colors that they're not biased.
Yeah.
So what we have to do is we have to approach this. There's really 3 trains leaving the station at the same time. One train is what women can do. What can we do today in a gender-biased workplace? Acknowledging that we're not going to be able to change the attitudes and the beliefs of everybody that we interact with. And that's really the work that Al and I have done with both our book, It's Not You, It's the Workplace, and Breaking Through Bias. Because there we say, we're not going to wait for the world to change. What can you do today in your career? And so that's sort of one train, which is what women can do today, right now, to be sure that our careers can be as rewarding and as fulfilling for us as possible. There's another train that needs to be leaving the station, and that's what men need to do about the issue. And the problem is that the studies show that 90% of women say that it's harder for a woman to succeed in the workplace, and only 20 or 30% of the men think that it's any harder for a woman. So information becomes part of the problem. We need to provide information. We need to get men to understand that it's in their best interest, that it's in the best interest of their organization to be welcoming and supportive of not just the men who look like them, but women as well. And then that third train is really what organizations need to do in order to overcome the bias. They're not going to be able to get rid of it. Unfortunately, it's, as Andi said, it is fairly hard to change. And so what organizations need to do is organizations need to take the subjectivity out of the decisions that affect careers. And what that means is make it so that the resumes that come in somebody removes the name of the person, so that you're looking at their gender-free capabilities. When it comes to compensation and promotion, to take away some of the subjective, well, she's not a self-starter, or he's a go-getter, to get rid of that stuff and look at the core competencies. How does this person perform this responsibility? How do they perform this other responsibility? And so it's what organizations need to do. That is where Al and I are focusing now on our third book together, which is going to be about what we can do to try to change the needle, move the needle for overcoming gender bias, when it is so hardwired that when a baby is born, the first thing somebody asks is it a boy or a girl? They don't ask, is the mother still breathing? They don't ask, how's the mom doing? They want to know if it's a boy or a girl. And those are the sorts of things that over time, with dealing with problems today, what can we do in the workplace, getting men involved, and then also what organizations need to do, and to encourage their colleagues to be pleased with a small win. If you accomplish something, if you present it as the elephant and say, you're going to have to eat this right now, people are just going to walk away. But if you pick around little small wins, feel around different parts of the elephant, miraculously you can go forward. So that's a key part of what we're up to.
What you're saying is so true. When we work with organizations to help them change, what we find is that if you can't visualize the world that you would like it to be, you can't get there. So we often start with, talk to us about the way you interact today, or let us take some videos and watch how you're doing it, because you can't imagine it anyhow. But when you watch it on a video, and then you begin to break it down into listening to what people are saying and watching, you're smiling, I do too, because what's there it's not visible. Make it like a TV show, and all of a sudden it's very visible. And then we begin to have the folks begin to write a story or draw one about how they think a diminished biased world might look like. Talk to us. How would we change this movie that we just recorded? So you're sitting in a board meeting or a meeting of any kind, and a woman starts to say something and the guy shuts it down. It's still the same problem it was 30 years ago. I went to a board meeting. There were 49 men, a nun, and me. I didn't say much. And one of the chapters in my book by Delora Tyler says exactly the same thing. She was sitting in the board meeting at the Detroit News, and if she said something, nobody heard her. If the guy said something, everybody thought it was a good idea. So now how do we begin to change that? The research that I find, so I'll let you say something in a moment. But
No, go ahead.
Because to your point about those babies, the research on kids, give them blocks and the girls set it up as a kitchen and how they're taking care of the baby, and the boys take care of it, and they're all pirates and they're all going to tackle the damsel. We teach early and the boys embrace it early. And it's a really interesting world that we're going to have to change. I want to talk about why in a moment, but you were going to say something. I'm sorry.
Oh no, what I was gonna say is that how do we change the conversation? It's inevitable that women are going to know exactly what you were talking about when you said that a woman says something brilliant and nobody hears her. And 5 minutes later, Fred says the same thing, and they get out a golden chariot and carry him around the room. And one of the things that we have to do is, as the woman who said the brilliant thing, she has to own her own ideas.
Yes.
And instead of sitting there with her mouth open or her jaw down to the ground and offended, what she needs to do is she needs to say, Fred, that was a nice restatement of what I said a few minutes ago. Let me elaborate further on the point. A good meeting leader would have figured out that she had said it first and should have done that for her.
Yes.
But the meeting leaders who pay enough attention to be able to do that are very few and far between. And so she needs to do it for herself. Other women in the room need to be attuned to it and raise this point so that she doesn't always have to be the one saying, Fred, I just said that. And in advance, she could arrange with somebody else in the meeting, a man, a woman, it doesn't have to be a woman, that they're going to watch each other's back and to make sure that they're going to be there to support the other person. And after a while, people start to understand it and see it. And so it's creating a positive buzz about your own accomplishments instead of just sitting there and waiting for the good work to be rewarded. It just doesn't work that way.
But you know, well, you said something important. You're giving them the words and the mindset that say you need to own it. Yes, you need to set the stage so that when you say it, somebody knows how to support you. And then you don't have to begin to feel that the others are going to be aggressive or antagonistic because you had a good idea. I mean, the competitiveness and the rivalry has going to have to diminish. And we have to start talking about collaboration and creativity, a different set of words and feelings about it. Because if we're going to be defensive about my idea and your idea, we'll never get them to come together. The research is great. The more ideas you have, the more fantastic, and they come at the intersections. So unless we allow a lot of them to come out from guys and gals with lots of cognitive diversity and gender diversity, you're going to miss them all. And you're going to be so protective of your own ideas that you'll never get them to combine. So in a sense, we need a new script for the woman, but also a new mindset for the guy that this isn't competitive. I've got to win or lose. This is for the larger business that we're in. These are major transformations, aren't they?
Well, they're definitely major transformations. And that's why I view it as three different trains leaving the station, because if we only focus on what the organization needs to do, structural problems, then we're not going to be around to see those changes necessarily. And so what we need to do is we need to be worried about something remedial at the same time that we're trying to worry about the big picture issues that need to be solved. Now, very often women will react to what I just said negatively and say, why do I have to do all the work? Why is it my problem? It's their problem. And the answer to that is, yes, it is their problem, but it's your career. And if you want to wait for somebody else to worry about your career, you're going to be waiting a long time. So
yes.
You really have to own your own accomplishments, and you have to be prepared to do what it takes to be certain that you're not overlooked just because you're a woman. And unfortunately, that happens.
A thought for you, we're both on the Women's Business Collaborative, and we truly embrace the 9 initiatives, but a couple of them are very profound, one of which is getting 25% of the boards to be women. And between the NASDAQ and others who are becoming very aggressive about it, thank goodness, there's a subset of this, which is you put the woman on the board and nobody listens to her. And so there's another dimension here, which is not just getting them on the boards, but getting a different culture on those boards, like your workplace, where their thoughts are embraced, they can be heard, and the competition diminishes, the collaboration, you know, I'm big on this, can we, you know, think of these as joint ideas, can grow. But my fear is that their impact will be less than what's possible because it's a culture. And you're smiling because I think there's something bigger than a bear in getting them on those boards, right?
Yeah, I mean, having a seat at the table is not enough if you don't have a voice. And part of the issue there is that the culture is not going to change quickly. Some of the studies show that the way to solve that problem is not to have one woman on the board, but to have a critical mass of women in senior leadership. And when you have a critical mass of women at the top, then miraculously, the women working their way up have not just role models, but they know that they can make it go, make a go of it. And the other people know that women are contributing to the whole process. And so what we need to do is, it's not just a numbers game. It has to be a collaborative issue. Now, women are great at collaboration
Yes.
As a stereotype, because we're trained to worry about the other guy's feelings. We're trained to worry about those sorts of things. Men are trained to worry about who's in the one-up position. And so the studies show, some of the surveys show that people are clamoring for more collaborative leadership. But if it's a woman who's going to be the collaborative person, well, then obviously she doesn't understand the job. She's obviously gotten it because of something other than her competency. So again, we're back to Goldilocks, and we need to worry about Goldilocks in the boardroom, as well as we need to worry about it in the schools and beginning of our careers and in the nurseries. We need to be thinking about these issues.
You know, today is Betty Friedan's 100th birthday, if she was still here. And today, I think they said today is Betty Friedan Day. And I was intrigued. I posted something on Facebook, and you know, she's a woman who tried to revolutionize the place of women in our society. What seems to be yesterday, but it was a long time ago. And she was both beloved and not so beloved. It's never easy when you're trying to transform it. I have a hunch you're getting resistance on the one hand, people who are saying, of course we have to, but not doing much about it on the other. Barbara Bruno, a woman on the Women's Business Collaborative, tells me that the recruiters bring in a diverse workforce and the hirers don't hire them. I mean, this is another gentleman told me that all of his workers are women and all the managers are men. This is going to be another decade of pushing. And I wish the Betty Friedans are here, because they are bold enough to go past the folks who are counter to their thinking. I mean, there's a Phyllis Schlafly waiting for us, and ready to say, of course not, that's not what we do. But on the other hand, businesses that have women in leadership roles do well, really well. And women can lead. It's Jamie Candy, that chapter in my book will show you. She's turned around several companies and made them all successful, including my husband. But there's something here that's happening. And I love Kamala Harris, but there's something even bigger than all of them. I mean, this is time for us to take together and build the teams and make it all happen. So we're just about done with our time, although you and I could talk for a long time. You're a futurist. You're looking to the future. You already have a vision in your head. Is there something you want to share? I mean, I keep pushing out my clients to say, visualize this. It can change. You can change. You need to collaborate with your mind, and all of a sudden you'll see things that were bad or good. It's just your mind. So how are we going to help them get someplace new? What do you see coming?
Well, one of the things that I would say is that men are mentored and sponsored and supported in their careers in ways that women are not. Yes. And women get a bad rap because senior women are accused of not helping and supporting junior women, when in reality, they do most of the mentoring of men and women. And so one of the things that Al and I are doing is we, in collaboration with Wilma, that you mentioned, the Women's Leadership and Mentoring Alliance, we're wrapping up a 70-pair mentorship program that we started in 2020. And in the next month or two, we're planning on starting another cadre of mentorship for women who are at the beginnings or sort of early middle of their careers, and women who are students, where we'll have mentors that are women and men. And so one of the things is that getting people involved in this mentorship initiative is very important because women can develop the confidence and the sense of themselves through these sorts of programs that are not available to them in their workplace or in their schools. So that's something that we're doing.
And in some ways, I think we're all coming together today to do something quite transformative. I think you said something earlier, a woman has to take responsibility, but doesn't have to do it alone. And she can begin to collaborate with the guys to begin to change. It's a soft echo. We need to understand that people aren't bad. They just don't know. And so how do I teach them gently so they can actually hear and learn? And people who say, I'm all for diversity, inclusion. I listened to Brian Hallahan, who's a brilliant genius who set up HubSpot at his partners session a couple of nights ago. And he said, we're all for diversity, inclusion, and belonging. But when we formed the company, it was all white guys. And the women had a hard time coming in because it wasn't their tribe and they didn't feel comfortable. And I had a hard time realizing that I had created a white-topia. And now we're bringing them in, but it's not easy to find a way to change the culture so that it is a diverse, inclusive, one that people want to belong to. Humans belong. They want a herd they belong to. So this isn't sort of small or easy. And the other thing is, I'm going to put a push in for my book. This is all about Rethink. Rethink came out of my recognition that women who were coming out of college needed role models. Andie is one of them. But there are 10 women and myself in there who tell stories about how we hurdled the hurdles to become who we are. And the idea is that other women can listen to the stories like today's and begin to say, I can do that. So think of us as theater coaches. We want you to change your role on the stage. And instead of feeling, oh my, I'll never make it, think of, okay, of course I can. And if you collaborate with your mind, you can. And so that's what we're trying to do to help. So any last thoughts, Andie? And then we'll say goodbye to everyone.
I think based on what you were just saying, read your book is definitely a last thought. But on top of it, I'll say something, which is that perfection is overrated. And what we really need to do is we need to be prepared to take a risk and follow your dreams. And that's the most important part. But if we're concerned about perfection, then we're going to be immobilized. And so we really need to give ourselves permission to fail and permission to not do things perfectly.
I'll add one thought to your thoughts, because if we can do that and we celebrate the small wins, you mentioned those.
Yes.
We change on increments on the sides. You're not going to turn the battleship with an oar. But you got a lot of folks who are using those oars a little at a time and we're moving them, but celebrate the small wins so you can see progress. Of course, it's not there where we want it to be. I'm not quite sure what that is. But as we move along, and give an attaboy to that guy who saw your idea as a big one, and don't forget that that hug, and even if it's a virtual one, says a lot, because our minds remember what we celebrate. And if you don't celebrate it, it won't remember it. So even if they did a good thing and you don't say anything, it didn't register. So we've got a lot of work to do on collaborating with our mind and with each other. What fun. Andie, this has been such fun. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll say goodbye to those who are on the panel and thank you for joining us. It's been absolutely a pleasure. Now,
thank you so much.
You're welcome so much. And buy Rethink, guys and gals. Read it and review it. Amazon, Goodreads, they all love the reviews. Take a look at the others that are there. What helps me really propel me are the joyful little stories about how a guy's going to give the book to his daughter, who is a minority and isn't sure where she's going. And now he has hope. If nothing else, we sell hope. And that's where we're going. Am I right?